And our second speaker of the panel is Professor Simonetta Ponchia from the University of Verona, whom you've already happily heard from. She's a specialist on Syro-Mesopotamian history, especially the first millennium BCE, including cultural history and literary traditions, and I'm happy to welcome her. Thank you very much.
So, contrary to the great hegemonic powers of the late Bronze Age, the Neo-Assyrian Empire had direct heirs. They had extended dimensions, included multi-ethnic population, were organized in a centralized system supported by the delivery of tribute, with a military machine that secured controlled expansion, and were centered on the royal persona. Thus, it happened that the Assyrian dominion was perceived and portrayed as the legitimizing precursor and model of the following empires in different traditions. It has been discussed whether the origin of the idea of the translatio imperii is to be sought in the Greek world, especially in Asia Minor and Lydia, or in the Near Eastern milieu. But it is the role of the Assyrian is a knowledge both in the historiographic tradition transmitted through the classical authors and in the Near Eastern sources. The development of an imperial religious policy is obviously a central issue in the definition of the imperial model of power and its transmission. In this presentation, I take into consideration only some aspects of this complex matter, and especially the role of the administrative organization in the diffusion of ideological and religious principles. Main instrument and medium of the transmission, mediation, and adaptation of the political and religious message over time and through diverse political circumstances was the scribal class, which included the redactors of royal inscriptions, administrators, priests, experts of various disciplines who were part of and operated together with the members of governmental and local elites. This class had formed the backbone of the Assyrian Empire, contributed to construct the imperial ideology, at the same time absorbed and propagated it and contributed to its continuity. Babylonian dependency from Assyrian institutions is discernible, for instance, in the list of court officials mentioned in Nebuchadnezzar's prism. Various titles point to the Assyrian terminology, likely absorbed during the period of Assyrian control of Babylonia. On the other hand, Assyrianisms and Assyrian stylistic features in Nabonidus inscriptions were to be credited, especially according to Schaudig, to scribes who maintained Assyrian scholarly tradition. More specifically, some interesting cases of direct and explicit quotation have been singled out. Quite understandably, the last great king, the last Neo-Assyrian king, Assurbanipal, was mentioned in Nabonidus inscriptions. He was linked to the seat of the last Assyrian resistance, the city of Haran, where, after usurping the throne of Babylon, he reconstructed the sanctuary of the man god Sin. Although he condemns the destruction of Babylon by Sennacherib, Nabonidus links his actions, especially temple rebuilding, to those of the Sargonids. It is most notable that also the inscriptions of the conqueror of Babylon, the Persian Cyrus, connected his accomplishments to those of the last great king of Assyria, Assurbanipal. Cyrus explicitly refers to the inscriptions left by his Assyrian predecessor in the city wall of Babylonia called Imgur Enlil. And he says, I saw within it an inscription of Assurbanipal, a king who preceded me. As is well known, Cyrus overtly condemned Nabonidus' religious policy and portrayed himself as restorer of neglected cults. Moreover, the account of his entering in Babylon as executor of Marduk's will is reminiscent of Sargon's II, the Assyrian king, account. Thus, he also directly connected his activity to that of the Assyrian kings to legitimize his power as sanctioned by the Babylonian gods. As to the direct quotation of Assurbanipal's inscription, it has been observed that this not only aimed at discarding the power of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, but also that this sentence is at the same time reminiscent of Nabonidus' expressive strategy, although with the aim of reversing its meaning. It is Cyrus who is the heir of Assurbanipal's power, as well as of his mastery of scribal art and knowledge. Due to the nature of our sources, it is difficult both to measure its contribution to later imperial organizations and to articulate a comprehensive design of the Assyrian government system. Mostly because it ought to be considered that this system was an evolving one. As a point of departure, we can take the programmatic assertion of some royal inscriptions. After conquering new territories and submitting their inhabitants, the Assyrian king says, I counted them as people of my country. It meant not only, as it has often been observed, that the new subjects had to pay taxes, corvée, military service, but that for these reasons they became part of an administrative system organized in Assyrian palaces and outposts, as attested by letters, administrative and legal texts. The efforts and the difficulties of creating a class with the awareness of contributing at various levels to the organization of the provincial administration are evident in some documents. Among the letters sent from provincial governors and officials entrusted with the organization of military outposts to warrant the control of the conquered territories and of the itinerary system that connected the empire, or of the fiscal system, some seem to make explicit the role of trained personnel and at the same time the difficulties in organizing the control of the territory. In a letter which was sent to the king from a western province, the official, his name is Adad Hatti, requires, and I quote, now let the king my lord give me Assyrian and Ituaean people, so I can have them hold the territory. In fact, there is no Assyrian city overseer, nor any Assyrian gate guard in Supat. End quote. Another official in charge of contributions claims, if these peoples who are Assyrians refuse to fear the king my lord, how will foreigners behave towards the king my lord? An important issue is to evaluate how diffused was this system based on the presence of Assyrian officials and the active involvement of local elites in the Assyrian government, the maintenance of local institutions, or the transformation into Assyrian ones. The situation was seemingly varied. The privilege granted to Babylonian towns, for example, apparently included the role of local institutions, not only fiscal benefits. And also the loyalty oaths sworn to the Assyrian dynasty point in this direction. In a provincial area such as Unki in the west, the loyalty oath, which were discovered at Tel Tainat, reveals a specific structure of the provincial government. The categories that swear the oath included the provincial governing staff, the scribes, military and administrative officials, military personnel with various ranks, and craftsmen. The documents of the Ade, of the loyalty oath, which was kept in the temple but sworn by all the citizens, makes clear that all had a common duty, which identified them as members of the Assyrian Imperial organization. That is, to revere and protect the reigning dynasty. The public ceremony of the oath made manifest this consciousness. The list of categories is interesting because it represents a bureaucratic model of the state, besides the oikomorphic model based on the concept of Bitu, household, and the physiomorphic model centered on the king as body politic. Dressing in purple and receiving silver bracelets as a way to identify high status official, even of foreign origin, is another practice that may be considered in this perspective. It is difficult to evaluate the degree of success of the diffusion of this model. Richardson has recently considered the problem in the perspective of continuity. And I quote, Assyria may have failed to develop or exploit cosmopolitan identities in their ideological and administrative structure, but they began to name the problem. End of quote. On the other hand, the Ade tablet was kept in the temple, was sealed by Ashur's seal, the national god of Assyria, and has therefore the value of the tablet of destiny. As expressly said in the tablet, it should be regarded as your God for the subscribers to the oath. The divine agency of the treaty becomes so effective, as stressed by Radner, as to determine revenge against the traitors, and to be used in the penalty clauses even of private legal documents. Moreover, the divine sanction of the Ade can be compared with the oracular procedure which ratifies royal decisions. The whole administrative system, not only the royal entourage or the decisional procedure at the highest level, appear to have been submitted to this type of control, that is, to supreme control by the gods, and the only interpreter of the will of the gods was the king, thus suggesting the diffusion of a theocratic model of the state. The nature and role of Assyrian religious policy has been often discussed, also in relation to the diffusion of the image of the national god Ashur in the conquered territories and the tolerance of local cults. Let's keep to the administrative perspective. If we consider temple administration, we may observe the role of the clergy of Ashur in the royal religious policy. From royal decrees and colophons appended to texts of various types, especially cultic ones, we apprehend that temple personnel was moved from one cultic center to another. This was likely operated under the control of the king or of the royal family. The most interesting case is that of Uruk and the Eanna temple, which has been analyzed in particular by Paul-Alain Beaulieu. Administrative documents dated to the time span from Nabonidus to Cambyses attest to the cult of Ashur written An-Shar and likely equated with the local god Anu, and to the presence of personnel with Assyrian names and with name composed with the theophoric Ashur, who are also identified as men, explicitly identified as men from the city of Assur, Libi Ali. Since a high functionary of the Anna temple bearing the name of Ashur-bani-sheshu is attested already in the middle of the 7th century, so during the period of Neo-Assyrian dominion, Beaulieu infers the hypothesis of a direct control of the affairs of the Anna by means of Assyrian personnel during the phase of the Assyrian power. Moreover, later on, so in Neo-Babylonia and Achaemenid time, the name of the personnel not only refers to Ashur, but in some cases are linguistically Assyrian. Okay. A patoscopic text from a private library in Uruk of Achaemenid time was written in Neo-Assyrian script and bore a colophon of Ashurbanipal library. Still, in Hellenistic times, there is evidence of the persisting of the Assyrian erudite and scholarly tradition and of the awareness of its nature and importance in the text collection unearthed in the site. Thus, the question has been posed of the possible influence of the Ashur-Anshar theology even in the development of the cult of Anu in the following centuries. Such an involvement of personnel from Assur could be compared with the cases of other examples in Assyria and with the evidence of Assyrian anthroponyms from other Babylonian towns. And as part of the policy that also involved the creation of libraries as instruments of the priests or theologians, of these priests and theologians they are operating. It is difficult to state how exemplary or peculiar the case of the southern city of Uruk is, and how much the lack of clear evidence in other cases is due to the chances of discoveries. On the political side, Uruk provides instances of both the active involvement of the local high class in the government and of the survival of an Assyrian memory after the end of the empire. The town was a pro-Assyrian outpost during the civil war between Assurbanipal and Shamash-Shumukin, but its ruling class had a key role in the final defeat of the Assyrian dynasty, since the founder of the Babylonian Empire, Nabopolassar, originating from the town and likely from its formerly pro-Assyrian ruling class. It can at least be hypothesized that the Assur priests and theologians sided a pro-Assyrian local ruling class in a key urban outpost of Assyrian dominion. The heritage of the Assyrian Empire is made up by the heritage of these centers, where, at various levels and in diverse forms that require specific analysis, the Assyrian model of power was diffused and preserved even after the Assyrian collapse. In these centers and their libraries, the theological conceptualization of the empire appears to have been an issue. Seemingly, as an adaptation of older models of monarchic power, in the poem of Erra, in the representation of war as a cosmic event, at a certain point the god says in a prophesying tone, and I quote, the Sealand, Subartu, Subartu, Assyrian, Assyrian, Elamite, Elamite, Kassite, Kassite, Sutians, Sutians, Gutian, Gutian, Lulubian, Lulubian, land, land, city, city, house, house, man, man, brother, brother, must not spare one another. Let them kill each other. Then, afterwards, let Akkad arise to slay them all, to rule them, everyone. Thank you for your attention.